from Cohen Law Services, Lady Law, and the host of Legalese. You're listening to News Radio 580 AM, 94.9 FM, Worcester's news, weather, and traffic station. So glad you tuned in this Saturday morning. We're having our spectacular 2-hour show on autism, treatment, awareness, acceptance, and I'm joined in the studios by three wonderful people who have their own perspective on behaviors, on how we can move together as a society in terms of the treatment piece, in terms of the awareness piece, and of course in terms of the advocacy piece. But we've got a caller online now, so we're going to take the call. Welcome to the show. You're on the air with Legalese. Can you hear me? Yes, hi, you're on the air. Hi, Lottie. Thank you for calling in. What's your question? Can you hear me, Lottie? I think we lost. All right, we lost the caller. All right, well, if she calls back, 508-755-0058, a call coming in from California. Look, autism is something that I've been saying for quite some time now, is not just about the diagnosis, about the 1 in 68 children, but it's about families in general. It's about how we move forward as a community to service, to understand, to advocate. When we think about your organization, Scott, where is the greatest strength that your organization is or has in terms of the advocacy piece? You've been talking a lot about the legislation, but give us a little bit more of an insight into what you guys are doing over there.
Well, it's, because we're all grassroots local, our greatest strength is in the local communities. And since every community in America is different, the other greatest strength we have is each one of our affiliates adapts to the local community. But for an advocacy effort, we're very strong at the State House, because you've seen in the last 10 years, let's say, more and more decision-making impacting people with autism or disabilities being made at the state level. And we're, of course, very, very active at the national level. The other advocacy issue is self-advocacy, which we're really big in, where we want to make sure people with autism are front and center advocating, and that our positions are positions that people with advocacy and parents are all agreeing on. And sometimes that's not always easy to get that kind of agreement. But I would say right now, particularly right now with the potential budget coming up, the education voucher debate will be occurring, we need to be in those discussions in a very civil way, and protecting and making sure people with any type of disability don't get negatively impacted if we don't watch it. The proposed budget, which is still being developed, has a tremendous amount of cuts, and when you cut legal aid,
right,
that hurts people with autism. When
right.
you cut Amtrak, guess how a lot of people with autism love taking trains, and that's their way of communicating, commuting. So we are constantly. It's just not autism. It's not the Medicaid funding, which is the primary funder, but it's all those other funds. So we're keeping an eye on that. The voucher bill is going to be a very interesting discussion, because we know a lot of public schools fail our kids, but we also don't want to leave our public schools, they have a responsibility. They got a legal responsibility. We don't want people to be pushed onto the side.
No, and I understand that piece all too well, Scott. I've served on the charter school board for about 4.5 years, so I am very familiar with what's going on in our public schools, and again, this idea of no child left behind. Well, how do we support now a community of children with disabilities and try and integrate them into society? And I think, at least in terms of what you guys are doing, I love what you were speaking about. Just for example, this idea of going to a restaurant. Edify us. Tell us a little bit about that. It's good.
Yes. I love it. There's a discussion about behaviors. The best way to help a child or individual without a meltdown is don't put them into situations where there's meltdowns.
Right.
And as parents, we kind of know, and as individuals know where it is. But one of the things we do is, how do you create a society that's more autism friendly? And autism friendly can mean that the restaurant you go to, and we have a lot of restaurants that on a certain night of the week they'll have an autism friendly environment where the lights aren't dim and you don't have the loud music. AMC Theaters, which we've been a strong partner with, has sensory responsive movies. And guess what those movies do? They don't have like 30 minutes of the the previews, which none of us like.
Oh my gosh, I know.
And they also don't have this loud noise. They don't tear down the lights so that you can't even see anything. If kids want to stand up and walk around, they walk around. And guess who goes to those? Not only everyone goes to it.
Of course.
I mean, so they know it's a great business, but every one of us, I speak from a father, it's a wonderful bonding experience when you can take your child to a theater.
Right.
But it's not a real good bonding thing when you take your child to a theater and they're going to have a meltdown because of the noise.
Right.
These are wonderful things. We're talking about to some retail stores. How do you open up a store an hour ahead of time? How many kids are going back now for school and clothing? And that's kind of a nightmare situation. I remember with my kids, it's never any fun to do that kind of shopping. But if you could open up an hour, if you make it so that lines aren't that long,
Right.
if you could look at, instead of having someone to go through 97 aisles to get to where your kids are, that people could help you point, it makes it more experience. How do various restaurants have gluten-free meals, which a lot of people on the spectrum like to have. So it's creating an environment. It's not, again, it's like an accommodation at work. It's not only good for people with autism, it's good for everyone.
I love that answer, Scott. I'm going to just cover this one point because I think it's important that we get it across to the listeners because we get these questions and these phone calls a lot. Currently, we know as it stands today, there's no single cause of autism spectrum disorder. In fact, research has suggested that autism may develop from a combination of genetic and non-genetic or environmental influences. What we do know, of course, is that ASD is increasing exponentially. Julie, I'm going to turn this over to you for a minute. In terms of your foundation, how do you implement your message that behavior analysis leads to effective living when, for example, approximately 40% of the children are diagnosed as nonverbal and may have an IQ that's on the lower end of 70?
Well, the interesting thing is that one of my father's greatest contributions was to analyze verbal behavior. How do people talk and what are the controls over what they say? And one of the things that he did was to look at how verbal behavior impacts the kinds of consequences. And one of the categories that he talked about was called the MAND, and people with autism usually heard of the MAND. And it is where a way of communicating so that you get whatever it is you were deprived of or that you want at the moment. And when you have MAND training, then you get this communication that is such a necessary component of behavior for individuals that don't have other verbal behavior.
Right. What a great answer, Julie. Thought I was going to stump you on that one, but I should have known better. It took me a long time to come up with that one. All right, folks, believe it. We're up against a break, and when we come back, we're at our last segment of the show. So if you have any questions, 508-755-0058. I think we've got our caller back. We'll take her on the other side of the break. Please don't go anywhere. So much more to come. You're listening to News Radio 580 AM, 94.9 FM, Worcester's news, weather, traffic station. Legalese will be right back.